All right. Chris OB, what is up, my man?
Drew, how you feeling tonight? You feeling good?
I am feeling good. Hope everybody's got their hurricane supplies and they're hunkered down and ready for a jam packed episode. Couldn't think of anybody better to start off my hurricane party with than none other, the GOAT himself, Chris O'Brien. So, a little bit about Chris O'Brien, y'all. He is currently the state capitol reporter for WKRN News 2 in Nashville, Tennessee. There are a Nexstar station, and prior to that, Chris worked in Greensboro as a general assignment reporter and MMJ, otherwise known as One Person Band. You did it all, so hopefully it's gotten a little better for you there in Nashville. Besides being in Music City, I'm a little jealous myself, but y'all, I'm so excited for this episode, and I know you're probably sick of me saying that because I say that every week, but I truly mean it. And Chris is not going to take the credit for this, but I call him the GOAT of journalism. He was one of my former colleagues at WFT at UF, and he was actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Chris, but one of the youngest anchors to ever be on the desk at WFT. So I'm just so excited for you to be here, and can't wait to see what kind of wisdom you give for me, for our listeners, for our viewers, all that. So yeah.
I just know JT Santos told you to say that last part.
Actually not, but I know he mentions it quite often in all
He
his
does.
posted
That story, I'll just open up with that story. I'll run that back real quick. That moniker, the youngest 5 o'clock news anchor, that came from JT and I. JT Santos, old roommate of mine, still one of my best friends to this day. I call him at least once a week. We were just talking in summer of 18. We were living together for the first time, and I was just like, I had just gotten promoted to the anchor spot, which was like for me in my career, just like a big deal, and I was really proud of it. And I was like, man, JT, like I was 18 years old at the time. I was like, man, JT, I think I'm the youngest there's ever been. And he was like, oh yeah, look at this asshole, like just pumping himself up like that. I was like, honestly, I kind of deserve that. But so every time we went out, every before I met my current girlfriend, every girl that I met, every person, he would find the most inopportune. Every tour, we used to tour together for JCA and that sort of thing. And every inopportune moment he would take, he would bring it up. So I love him for it. I always will. Golly.
He's another goat at UF. Like, yeah, I'm older than y'all, but I look up to y'all. Like, Kalisha Whitman, hopefully, I told her that we were doing this tonight, so hopefully she'll tune in at some point. But I used to tell her, because I used to work one on one very closely with her. And I used to tell her all the time, like, man, I just want to be like Chris O'Brien. I'm not saying that just to build you up, but like, I really fell in that comparison trap in school. And she's like, Drew, Chris is great, but you gotta do your own thing. And that's kind of where this podcast was born, right? Like, day in, day out, I was like, man, I just want to get that big break, just want to graduate, just want to be on TV, and that's it. But I'm a big believer in faith, and that's got me to where I am today. And I truly believe that those doors were denied because I have such a platform as we're here tonight that I can tell my stories how I want them to be told. If I want to talk 30 minutes, if I want to talk for an hour, if I want to do a special, no one can stop me. And so my hope for this is, eventually networks will be coming to pay me for my content.
No,
So
I think that's smart. And you talked about the comparison trap too, right there, Drew. I think about that a lot. When I was in college, it was the same thing. You were always chasing somebody, and I think that's such a hard thing to. It's impressive to me that you have been able to identify that. I think about it myself. Because I always felt like I was chasing Victor, right? Victor Prieto, another terrific journalism school kid, and he's. I always think of him as my kind of like rabbit that I was chasing all the time. Never caught him. Golly, he won every award. He did just a little bit better. I got fourth in Hearst. He got second. I got a regional Murrow. He won a national Murrow. It's just like, oh my gosh, I just felt like, but it's hard, right? And And, you can't let that take away from your own sort of like accomplishments, right? Like the podcast, great accomplishment. And that's a great thing that you were born on. And you talked about not having restrictions. We'll talk more about restrictions in a bit, but golly, I try to make every package 1:30 that I do every story. And it's like, golly, it's hard. I asked for 2 minutes. My producer is like, yeah, that ain't happening.
Speaking of the anchor desk, one of the highlights of my career, and again, it's not just because you're Chris O'Brien, it's just because you are just an incredible person who I looked up to. Kalisha fought hard for me to get that shot on the desk. And not that everyone thought that I couldn't do it. I think they were just hesitant. It was unknown territory. I was the guinea pig for everything. But that's how I am in all facets of my life. Even my job at the Center for Independent Living, somewhere where we serve people with disabilities every day, I'm still in uncharted territory, and they never had someone work there that has a PCA, personal care assistant, that goes with them day to day. But one of the highlights was sharing the anchor desk with you. That was a great moment, but I'll never forget. I don't know what happened. Like, it wasn't supposed to come back to me, but the camera came back to me, and I had that oh shit look on my face. And Chris wanted to die laughing, y'all, but he kept it together. But I saw his little smirk, like, this is, like, I don't know, I'll never forget it. Like, I'm like, oh shit, like, what I did.
It's hard. No, that's the thing, and I'm shit. I remember that moment there, Drew. I wasn't laughing at you as much as it was just like the situation. I was just like, God, of all things to happen, like this is the one where it's just like, and like I still to this day when the camera hits me, like we had something happen last week where the camera was in the wrong spot, and me and my anchor were just like, are we supposed to talk? Like, are you supposed to talk? Like, we're just kind of staring here at each other, and it's just like it's an awkward spot for everybody. I do remember that moment. Though. You did a great job. I thought the show ended up turning out great. I had so much fun on that one.
It was the first time that we've ever had anchors, I believe, since the pandemic. So that was just a great historic moment, and to share it with you was even more incredible. So with that, I'll jump into my questions. Like, typically, I'm frantically preparing for podcasts, and what do I say, what do I ask? But I'm like, it's Chris. I'm like, you don't really need to prepare. Just go.
My girlfriend always tells me I'm pretty good at talking and that I should shut up more. So I think we'll be on a pretty good wavelength there.
So my first question: you could have been anything, Chris. When we grow up, we dream of being a firefighter, being a mechanic. You could have been anything, but you chose broadcast journalism. Why?
Yeah, I look back on some of my life, and actually, I remember wanting to be at least at some sort of on TV since I was young. I mean, I remember being like 5 and 6 years old and watching Sports Center at like ungodly hours of the morning. We're kids, 5 a.m. We're waking up at weird times. I used to wake up at like 5:30 or 6 and watch Neil Everett and Stan Barrett, the two Sports Center. They were Sports Center Los Angeles anchors, but their shows reran every morning. They were on the late night, and they reran every morning. And I always just remember thinking, like, man, like I feel like I could do that. Like I can talk. I don't know. It's just a couple guys like getting up there having a beer and talking. Not actually, but and as I kind of grew up, I love sports. That's always growing up. That was always my end game. Actually, like not news, not entertainment, not journalism specifically, just sports. I wanted to be in sports. I wanted to either be a coach. I wanted to be a sports reporter, an anchor, whatever the case may be. And I'll never forget why I made the change to news. 2 reasons. A, I remember talking to a news director that came and spoke to us on our advisory council, and he came to me and he said, Chris, here's the deal. Like, you can do sports, but I just had a sports position open, and 70 people applied. Most of them look, talk, act a lot like you, that sort of thing. And I had a news position open up that only had 30 people apply, offered more money, a better contract, and like you were in the minority of the type of people who were applying. So that was the first reason, just like trying to be more marketable. But really the more main reason was because I worked a couple of the games, actually for ESPN as what's called a booth coordinator, which means I was just like handed little promotional note cards to like I don't know, like big people. Like Beth Mowins was one of them.
So
Anthony Beck.
you were a little peon then. You were like
Yes,
nobody at this point.
yes. No, and to them, I'm still the same sort of status, but I'm just the guy that's handing note cards. And I remember sitting there, this is freshman or sophomore year, so 4 or 5 years ago. And I'm like, man, I'm sitting with the coolest people, like the people that are actually on air. This is like what I want to do. And I look over, I'll never forget. It was, I think if we were playing FSU or LSU, it was a decent sized game. And we're at the swamp and everything's rocking. And I look over and I can see my friends like in the student section, like having a damn party. And I was like, shit, like that's where I want to be. I don't want to be here. Like I don't want to be working. This is my pleasure. And so right then and there, I kind of realized like, okay, this is what I'm meant to do. This news thing. I talked to Harrison Hove, who icon at the University of Florida broadcast journalism, and he let me anchor, fake anchor for one of his broadcasts or one of the production 5 classes. And from there on, I remember sitting and anchoring with Hazley Pittman just as like a as a as like a mock. And hey, yeah, Hazley's great. And we were just sitting there, and I was like, man, this is anchoring is ultimately. We'll talk more about it, but ultimately, anchoring is like my end goal. So all of that, I kind of knew what I wanted to do, but getting there was the hard part. I knew I wanted to do TV. I just didn't know like how hard it was, or how tough the road is. And it's hard. It is a hard industry, but that was kind of my journey to where at least I am throughout college.
Yep. Speaking of Harrison Hope, he's very instrumental, it seems like, in everybody's career, myself included. I'll never forget it. It was, I think we've all had these moments in Harrison's class. And I've already shared this on the podcast, so I can candidly say this. But after the first day in his class, I literally went home and I cried. I'm like, this guy hates me. But
I think everybody has a Harrison cry moment. I swear.
But in the end, he made me better. We learned together, and I think he wouldn't mind me sharing this, that I made him better too. Because uncharted territories, as I was talking about earlier, how many people do you see on TV with a disability in a wheelchair? You don't. And that's one of the main reasons that I thought I was going to go into the industry, is to make that difference. But I've learned that there's different ways and different avenues to make that difference. I've had so many people, so many reporters follow me, because I'll never forget the moment that I did my first live shot in my skating chair. Never forget it. To most, it's just a stand-up, literally what it is. But to me, that was a phenomenal moment, because a lot of times when I was going to my interviews, people would crouch down to me and use the little squiggy high-pitched voice, and I'm like, no, I'm up here, like, you don't have to crouch down to me. And I think Harrison and I, we learned a lot. And in the end, I learned that it was just a little tough love. But now, I will recommend Harrison to everyone, right? He writes me glowing letters of recommendation, and when he wrote me that letter of recommendation, I cried again. But for the opposite reason, tears of joy, like, hey, this man does value me. He does care about me. And I really think that his class, and you can put your 2 cents in here too, really mirrors industry, and so does Kalisha. I know it took a little adjustment when Kalisha first came on board, because they both have 2 different approaches, but they both work, right? So I'm like freaking out, still putting myself up to that Harrison Hove Gator standard, and Kalisha's like, yeah, you're gonna mess up, but it's gonna be all right. And no, I'm not gonna get angry with you, but I'm like, but no, I'm thankful. I don't know about you, Chris, but I'm thankful that I have both, because Harrison pushed us. Harrison gave us that grit, but Kalisha gave us, for me, the digital side, the mobile side, something that I needed, because again, uncharted territory. It was better for me to report with my phone, and other instructors, they had no clue. But when Kalisha came in, she really changed my perspective, and she's like, nah, I want to Emmy with my phone. Like, not saying that don't try to use the big camera, but hey, you can get the same product with a mobile phone.
I think it's just interesting. I think you touched on it pretty well. The stark contrast between the two is so evident. You have like you said, Harrison pushes you. Kalisha pushes you just in different ways.
Uh huh.
Harrison is this. And I love Harrison. Still, I call him at least once a month just to check in and kind of go.
Harrison's great.
Harrison is this staunch, like, we are gonna find the man who did this type of journalism, which is great, which is super. It's a little bit old school, and it's what we need kind of more of. Sometimes we need more of it, and sometimes you need less of it. It's hard to strike that balance. Where Kalisha's completely the other side. It's like, we're gonna do this the way mobily. We're gonna do it a little bit softer, a little bit more understanding, that sort of thing. And it's hard. It's just two eras of journalism coming together, right? You got the newer era, which is less hard news, less breaking news, more storytelling, where we're going out finding the story and like finding out how, or even if it's good news, just finding out what this person's doing and putting a face to a name. Whereas Harrison's is doing good in the community, where it's like, these people are messing things up. These government employees, these officials are screwing people over, and we're just letting it happen. But if he's reporting, if Harrison Hope is reporting, I'm like, ooh, I'll be running scared if I'm doing something wrong. He
Yeah,
gonna get me.
I love Harrison. And I'll never forget um, when I got the call from West True News. I kept going back career after career. Just did the normal thing, but I didn't get any bites. But I finally got that call from Orlando, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, they want me to be their intern. And so, who did I run to? I ran straight to Harrison, and I'm like, Harrison, what I do? And he's like, what do you mean, what do? You take it. And I'm like, Harrison, logistically, how is this going to work? How am I going to go back and forth to Orlando? But I did it 2 weeks or 2 days a week in Orlando, and I would get up at 5 a.m., go down to Orlando, stay the night in a hotel, work all day until 6 p.m., and then the next morning at 8 a.m., I was in the newsroom to do News in 90 with Harrison. And he was like, I don't know how you're doing it, but you're doing it. I'm like, I'm doing the damn thing. Like, can't's not a word. But he really helped me shape those skills. And Kalisha came in at the right time, too, because I was just about to say, okay, news, I tried this, but it's not going to work out. But Kalisha came in right, I think it was like a year before I graduated. She's like, nah, you gotta produce products. You're gonna get on the anchor desk. You're just as good as anyone else. And I really needed that because I was about to give up hope on myself. So, yeah.
I think Kalisha came at such an instrumental time. You look at our newsroom, the leadership that was in the newsroom at the time, and we lost some really great people, with Harrison transitioning over into more of a faculty role, and just kind of the makeup of the newsroom where it was. We needed her, right? And that was the thing. I actually have a great, before we lose topic of Harrison, I have just, Harrison, he's a pusher, man. And one of my favorite stories, and he probably won't appreciate me telling this, but I'll say it anyway. It was getting down to the wire on Hearst. So I was trying to become, UF has a history of being Hearst Journalism Award producer, or whatever you want to say. We're a factory when it comes to that. We've put at least somebody in the Final Five the last, I don't know, 5 or 10 years at that point in time. And I was getting down to the wire, and I was getting really stressed out. And Harrison's just trying to push me to be better, but I'm seeing it as like, you're just pissing me off intentionally type beat. And I was asking him if we had a contact for somebody at Gainesville Police Department, because I was like, hey, just got off of the sheriff's office. Like, they said they didn't know and to refer me to the police department. Do we have a contact? Just like, hey, do we have anybody? He was like, no, you need to figure it out on your own. And I was like, okay. We went back and forth. It didn't just happen like this, but we went back and forth. The powder keg built, and I said, okay, like, F it. And I didn't say F. I said the full word. I said, all right, Harrison, F it. I'll figure it out on my effing own. And he was just like stunned, like could not. He tells a story in TV One, I think now every year. He was just like stunned. He was like, and we had to have a come to Jesus moment, because I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, I feel like you're not helping me, and you feel like you are, and we need to find the common ground. And we did. And we hugged it out. We sang Kumbaya, however you want to say it, and it worked. But Man, I have so many. Like, I can think of just so many stories off the top of my head. He used to just get after me. That was just one of many. And you know what? In the end, it ended up working out. Like you kind of alluded to, we ended up Victor and I both ended up making it to Hearst, and it worked out. So for
I
that, I was
know.
grateful.
I know. Y'all held the ranks. We made it. We were number one.
I
Um,
wasn't sure. I wasn't sure I was going to, man. I remember getting the call that Harrison called me that I had made it to the finals. Craziest kind of like timing. I'm sitting on the top of a mountain in Washington, the state of Washington. I had gone on a little trip with my cousins, my brother, and a friend of mine, and we were sitting at the top of this mountain because called Poo Poo Point, and they named it that because all the trains that would like poo poo like drive by. I'm sitting just like I can almost see Canada from where I'm at. Just this like vast wilderness. Seattle's out in the distance. It's beautiful. And Harrison calls me. And I'm just like, wow, this could not have been a better time to receive this call.
to that point, talking about the rigorous deadline, hard news, motivated, award-winning program that we have at UF, and we're so grateful to have mentors like Harrison and mentors like Alicia. Would you say that that has prepared you for industry? Has that helped your transition a little better, made it a little easier?
Oh, absolutely. And there's it's hard to explain to people who have not gone through a rigorous program. You look at schools, University of Florida, Arizona State, Missouri, UNC, USC, Northwestern, Syracuse, not to discriminate against any other schools that aren't those, but you can kind of see just the type of people that come into the industry from one of those schools versus another. I know people that came into the industry in a top or not in a top 60 who are in a top 60 market and are on their third job and they learned how to use the camera in the first one,
Oh
right?
wow.
And get I go back and forth on this a lot because on one hand I'm like, okay, they took that, they didn't know how to use a camera, but then now they're really damn good. So it's like I don't necessarily think you have to come from one of these great schools to be a great reporter. In fact, if you look at the majority of people, like probably more than half are not from one of those seven schools.
Mhm.
But at the same time, when it comes to that first job, it's like, okay, I'm coming in. I know how to use a camera. I know how to frame a shot. I know how to check my mic levels. I know how to do a rule of thirds. I know how to do X, Y, and Z. I know how to file a FOIA. I know how to do. I know how to find characters. All of these things. I know how to find phone numbers. I learned how to find a phone number at UF by checking the clerk of courts. Somebody had a traffic ticket, and I was like, you know what? Maybe their phone number's on it. They were. And so that sort of thing, it's not something you think about until you actually have to go through it. And because UF forces us to go through it through these investigative journalism classes, through TV1, through fact finding, whatever the case may be, it's hard. It's hard then, but then I'm in the actual industry. And I'm like, oh, great. I know exactly how to find these people and track them down. Check their voter records. Not a problem. Things like that make it at least a little bit easier. So yeah, I do think UF is just I could speak for hours about UF. I have my entire family went there. I was so grateful, so lucky that I went there and happened to be in state, happened to have my family go, happened to be journalism that I was doing. UF is such a great program, and I could talk about it for years.
Absolutely, and I'm trying to get back to there. I want to get my master's. Not sure if I want to go student personnel on higher ed or mass comm, but of course I've got the little birdie in my ear, Kalisha, saying do mass comm. But I'm like, Kalisha, I want to be versatile, do some new territory, because if you have a master's in something different, your skills are wide range, right? And even in my job now, it's not communications. I'm helping high school students with disabilities find jobs and go to college to determine that next step after high school. But I've found ways to still tell stories within that. And that's something that I've had to wrap around my head. No matter your occupation, you can still be a storyteller. There's always a great story to be told.
That's yeah. My last job, I worked for Spectrum News in Greensboro, and you know what? Went back and forth because I didn't love the way that we did work. We worked virtually and we used phones to shoot, like we talked about. And I went back and forth because at some level I was like, ugh, this is garbage. Like, I'd rather be shooting on a big camera so I can zoom in and stuff. But then I got to thinking, I was like, like, I'm still telling people's stories. Like, the method in which I do it doesn't define how good my story can be. Like I went and produced some of my best work there, I feel like, at this point, because it allowed me to have the freedom to shoot. Like, okay, with a phone, I can get right up in his grill here and like If I was shooting you, I'd be like, all right, here's Drew. Like, I'm gonna get my little thing here. I'm gonna get a reel up in his grill, that sort of thing. So that was really cool. And I think to your point there, you can be a storyteller, but not have the moniker of journalist, reporter, or storyteller. And that's what I think our society has moved to. You look at TikTok, like I think those people are storytellers a lot of the time. They're just telling people stories and having fun with it. It's just a little bit less rigorous than what I'm doing, I feel like.
Yep, I'm learning with TikTok, trying to get on one video that'll blow up. But it's great that you mentioned that mobile piece, Chris, because after I graduated, I went in the INC and talked with Kalisha a bit, and she's like, because back to that comparison trap. She's like, you used to compare yourself to Chris all the time, but I told you the mobile phone is a tool, and she told me, she's like, guess what Chris is using? It's not a big camera, it's a mobile phone, so it can be done. I'm like,
Here's the thing.
mhm.
If you are a reporter, and this is important, what I always tell people, I tell Harrison's class this, I tell Felicia's class this, use the phone, but know when to put it away. That's the only thing, is you got to know, okay, this is a serious situation. I should probably pull up the camera. But yes, I agree. I know Kalisha was pumping that up a lot, and I appreciated her for that.
No, she was like so excited for me.